All right, buckle up. We begin this morning with a Fox News alert from President Donald Trump vowing to fight back after being removed from the GOP primary ballot in Colorado. The state Supreme Court ruling that Trump violated the 14th Amendment of the Constitution because of January the 6th.
The Colorado Supreme Court confirmed that the district court got it right, that he did engage in insurrection. I think Section 3 of the 14th Amendment has to apply to the presidency, because if not, it's a get-out-of-jail-free card.
Literally, Jack Smith, who would charge Donald Trump with absolutely everything, including jaywalking if he could get away with it, didn't even charge Donald Trump or most of the rioters on January 6th with insurrection.
Presidential candidate and former Governor Ron DeSantis and current Florida Governor Ron DeSantis calling it an abuse of power, and the U.S. Supreme Court should reverse the decision.
And the White House hopeful Vivek Ramaswamy taking things a step further. Listen to this, saying, I pledge to withdraw from the Colorado GOP primary ballot until Trump is also allowed to be on the ballot. The former president spoke yesterday in Iowa.
They want to silence me because I will never let them silence you. And in the end, they're not after me, they're after you. I just happen to be standing in their way.
Well, the Trump campaign team wants to have the matter settled by the U.S. Supreme Court before a January 5th deadline, if he wants to be on the ballot in Colorado. Let's bring in Andrew Cherkansky, a former federal prosecutor and criminal defense attorney. Andrew, good morning to you.
Good morning. What a wild turn of events.
Yeah, no kidding. Now, this only pertains to one state, and it only pertains to their primary election. But with the Supreme Court deciding it, this is going to apply to all the states.
Well, there are dozens of other states that are evaluating the same issue. So I think that the decision in the state of Colorado is something that the Supreme Court has to weigh in on, because at the end of the day, this is a question of a political nature. Who is going to be the next president of the United States? Is that a question for the people of this great country, or is that a question for state courts that has yet to be done ever in the history of this country?
This is the United Uprising channel. Welcome to today's show. It is very important that people realize what is occurring in the United States of America, and that they don't buy into the propaganda that they are currently seeing as they are being gaslit on both sides of the aisle. I've talked about how for this country and for the New World Order, the global government structure to be in place, obviously, when you think about it, the current government structure has to crumble. So everything you're seeing is done by design. And the fact that Donald Trump is now being removed from ballots, starting in Colorado in this country, again, what does that do? It brings up the notion of the Supreme Court, of democracy, of a republic, of the power of civilians. And again, this eventually leads to what is a controlled civil movement. This is a control movement. This is not something that's going to occur organically. People are going to think by breaking away and going into red and blue states like I've covered for years. I've talked about this coming now, and you're seeing all the predictive programming with Civil War. Everybody could see it. But people think that they're doing this because they're being defiant of the communist democratic regime. What they're doing is they're herding you on the left and the right into specific states and territories that they want to herd you into. This is part of Marxism. This is part of communism. This is part of stuff that Lenin discussed. And what that is, if you haven't heard, okay, the withering away of the state. Because in a communist society, a communist government, there are no states. So in addition to the Supreme Court needing to fall, in addition to the House of Representatives needing to fall, in addition to the Senate needing to fall, the states also need to fall. So with this story about Donald Trump being removed, and again, I'm sure that, this year, 2024, is going to be one of the all-time biggest psyops we're ever going to see. Every single story, as we all know, are controlled stories. The left and the right are working together to bring down the government in general in this country. All the people who are politicians are in on it. They're all going to be taken care of. They're all going to be part of the next regime, this global government, for doing what they're doing now. And all the civilians are falling for it, hook, line, and sinker, thinking that it's just Democrats doing this. Oh, and the Democrats think it's just Republicans doing it. They're working everybody. Everyone's being gaslit. These secret societies, this has always been the motto, order out of chaos. So what has to happen is all the institutions have to crumble. Do you think it's a coincidence? Let's start here. Is it a coincidence that some of these topics, where in the past we would never hear much about the Supreme Court, we would never hear much about any of these types of things, when they started with Roe v. Wade, that was the beginning of getting civilians to say, you know what, we need a new government structure. We don't need the Supreme Court deciding, if a woman should be able to do this with a child or not. This was all done by design. Nobody was screaming for Roe v. Wade to be overturned all these years later. Now, it doesn't mean that people aren't pro and anti, obviously, that topic, because they are. But suddenly they just decided to do that, right? Suddenly out of nowhere, to thin air, they just came up and they're like, did you hear that they've decided to reverse Roe v. Wade? And everybody's going, what? Right? Inciting violence, inciting chaos, all done by design. So for the government structures to fall, you need things like that get people angry at the institution. Then what else do we get? We get stories of the insurrection psyop, probably the worst run false flag they've ever come up with. What else do we get? Well, the Senate this week I covered, right? The guy having relations with another man inside of the Senate. Well, of course it was two men inside of the Senate, because how else would they really, really anger and gaslight people on the other side? To say, oh, this whole structure is a joke. Oh, everything inside of the House and the Senate, et cetera, is a joke. It's disgusting. These are all strategically done by design. And that leads me to this clip I'm going to play you that was from Fox, continuation to what you saw before, about states separating, okay, from really what's going to happen is some of these states are going to follow Colorado's lead, right? And they're going to take Trump off the ballot. Now, there's 13 states that they're claiming. 13 states who will bar Trump from the ballot. Isn't it interesting that number 13? Yes, of course, we know it's an occult number 13. But also that originally there was 13 colonies who declared their independence from Great Britain, right? In 1776, 13 colonies declared their independence from Great Britain. And now we're going to start seeing states declare themselves independent. And again, eventually this leads to the decimation of states and the moving of people into territories. I've been talking about that so much over the last couple of years, for those of you that are new to it. All of this has been, as you've seen with Florida and Texas and California, have been to make specific states lure in specific people who are of a certain political ideology. There used to be, obviously, in a normal country, you have Democrat neighbors, Republican neighbors. Nobody cared what the person voted for. It didn't affect your day-to-day life. It was just a matter of what you were told about taxes. Oh, this person's better for our tax. Where's our tax money going? That's all it ever was. Nobody cared. Now nobody could look at the other person with different political ideologies, right? Because they've gaslit this entire thing into absolute chaos, where they've taken it so far with one side, with the stuff they want to do with your kids, to people castrating themselves, to trying to get your kids into libraries. I mean, they're doing it by design. Thus, they're going to make both sides separate from one another. And again, listen to some of this stuff from the news talking about the whole point and what they did and what they're trying to do with the 14th Amendment and civil war. And again, states separating, just like what we saw when these colonies were here. The 13 colonies declared their independence from Great Britain. These are all subliminally, they choose these numbers. They know that people remember the whole 13 colonies from school, etc. Now they're hearing about 13 states. People don't realize that for this global government is a communist government, that we have to destroy the institutions. So they're making the left and the right destroy it. Now the right is in an uproar over this. Because yes, of course, this is not democracy taking someone off the ballot. But if they realize that Trump is one of them and that they're doing this to gaslight people into destroying the institutions so they could bring in their new global government, then they'd realize that we've all been played and we're all being played. And that's the danger of the alt-right hijacking movement that occurred here. Because they're keeping smart people who could do something to stop this. They're keeping them herded into the left and right. And as long as you're in the left-right paradigm, as long as your mind is trapped inside of that, you will be herded with what's coming. Listen to this from Fox.
Well, so the idea of Section 3 of the 14th Amendment is a clause that was put in after the Civil War. And we have to remember what that means. The Civil War, where hundreds of thousands of Americans took up arms against each other, trying to create two separate nations here. That's the notion of insurrection at the time that that clause was written into the Constitution.
There's 13 other states that are looking to do the same thing as Colorado. They're looking to have their case heard and see what the state court says. So is there a scenario where Trump just won't be on certain ballots and would be on other ballots? Or is the Supreme Court going to rule one time on Colorado, and is that going to ripple down to all these others?
How can they say they're for democracy and not give a candidate an opportunity to make his case in court before they take him off the ballot?
Well, it seems like their complaint about January 6th was that there was an interference with the democratic process. But yet here we are interfering with the democratic process. The people of this great country are able to speak through their votes. They're able to make their decisions about what happened on January 6th, as well as throughout the course of President Trump's prior presidency and his prior actions. Let democracy work, not the courts determine who's going to be on ballots and who's not. I think the American people are well educated to make that decision.
So again, what was I saying earlier in the video? I was talking about withering away of state. You could even just use a basic, look it up in Wikipedia. I try to use that so people out there can just have a basic understanding of Marxism, a basic understanding of communism. It's the same thing. Okay, the withering of the state, the removal of the state. So for kids out there that don't understand, communism is completely state-run. State as in one, right? China runs and controls everything. They control the media. They control the food. They control all of it. It's all through the state, what you can and cannot say. We all see these ideologies and how they've seeped into our current reality, into our current culture, into our current world, right? Where speech has been removed. All these things have been removed in America under the guise of hate and hurting people's feelings. This is how they've convinced and tricked people here. Because if they flat out came out and told you what they were doing, trying to turn us into a communist country, even Democrats would disagree and not want that. They don't realize what's being done to them. So they have the civilians, again, bickering with one another, looking at this, saying, hey, now, we need to take this down. The left has constantly been talking about how the Supreme Court, we need a new institution because of the Roe v. Wade. Now the right is looking and saying, look at these criminals in Congress. If they take Trump off the ballot, we're going to have to completely separate. We're going to have to go into two separate countries, two separate territories. And people are like, it'll never get to that point. No? Okay, 4 years ago, if I told you it was at this point, you would have said it would never get to this point. All it takes is time and propaganda. That's the key to communism, is propaganda. It's the propaganda machine is in full control. And with the technology that they've introduced, people are under propaganda and under just full-on psychological assault 24/7. They're getting fed propaganda every day. And the people who think they're awake, the conservatives, don't realize that they're still trapped. They're still getting hurted, and they don't think it because they think that they're smart and they're awake because they see the communism and the corruption and the disgustingness, and they don't realize that Trump is working with them. He's the perfect person to do this. He's the only one that would ever get people. No people in the history of this country have ever been behind one candidate and opposed to the other as they are right now. It is levels of hate that we have never seen before. Everybody hates the other side, and it's filtering down into the civilians, and this is what they want. If we remain this way, they get what they want, which is a globalist structure, the decimation of the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, and the states, independent states as we know it. Move into territories. These are all things that are coming. They are happening, okay? It just depends on how they play this out in 2024. It is playing out in 2024. There's a lot of themes that we can look at that they can go with. Just imagine they continue to do this and they do a fake assassination. What that'll do. Who will step in? Who will be a new leader? Do they need Trump to remain as this figure to get everyone herded into the states? Very, very likely. Very likely. And then eventually they could do something to Trump. But they need to use these politicians who have now become figure points as false idols. Because really it used to be the politicians, nobody cared, nobody would follow. Trump and, whoever the Democratic person is, because they're so anti-Trump, they will 100% follow whoever the Democratic candidate is. Trump is the key to all of this. Trump is the key to the destruction of this entire structure that we have. And everybody out there who's following Trump think that he's the only one that could save the democracy. But he's the one, and it's not a democracy, it's a republic, which I've said a million times. But that's the talking point. They've convinced people that we're in a democracy and not even in a republic anymore. Nobody says boo, which tells you how the hive mind is really taking control of both sides of this. So I think it's very interesting that they're talking about the 13 states who are going to take Trump off the ballot. Then when you look back and you talk about how this country was supposedly set up with the 13 colonies who declared independence from Great Britain. Okay, this is all working out, obviously, according to script. And 2024 is going to be absolutely insane with what they end up doing here, how they gaslight people, how they work people. But there is no coincidence with these other stories that continually happen. This is done by design. You would never, ever hear stuff like this, right? The video that I just did about what happened on the Senate floor, if you didn't see it, you can go check it out. If you didn't hear, I'm sure most of you heard, two men were getting down in the Senate floor, two Democratic aide, and he filmed it and he uploaded it, stuff that's just completely bogus. I mean, not bogus, but I mean completely done by design. You know what I mean? Nobody can be this tone deaf. They do that, they put it out there, right? And then the left-wing liberal media says, well, allegedly this man was now thrown out of Congress, allegedly doing this act on the Senate floor. Well, it's on videotape. Right? So they just gaslight people by putting in the word allegedly. Oh, allegedly this guy got down with another guy in the Senate. And everyone's like, allegedly, right? Because the video proof shows that it wasn't alleged. There's video proof. How much more proof would you need to take the word allegedly away? And it makes people so angry because they're like, this is ridiculous. Now the liberal media is calling it alleged. This is done by design. It's gaslighting 101. If we remain divided, if we continue to believe this stuff that they pump out, this is going to go the way they want it to go. Okay? And that's the biggest concern that everybody should have. People need to realize all these people who think that they're awake, they're not. They're not awake because they look and they go, well, the mainstream media feeds us propaganda. Yes, it does. But why would you think the propaganda would start and end with Donald Trump? Don't you realize that every single thing that gets out there is to gaslight you and herd you? Nothing would make the news unless they wanted to. They wouldn't waste a second of their time talking about anything else. So even stuff with the ballot. This is gaslighting people. The Senate thing, gaslighting people. Roe v. Wade, gaslighting people, right? This is all done psychologically by design. The key to all of this stuff happening is the propaganda. If you go back and you read the Communist Manifesto, if you read stuff from Marx, if you read stuff from Lenin, all it talks about is propaganda and how the control of the propaganda machine is the only way that this fake revolution will start. This is not a real revolution. This is a fake manufactured revolution that they're herding people into, because never before have they been able to do this psychologically to people like they are now. And Trump is the perfect actor put in place to do exactly what they want to do. He is working with them. It is so obvious and clear. People just can't get past that point. They just can't, because they feel like there's no hope then. What are we supposed to put? You put your hope in Christ, but as civilians, we can all work together to stop this. There's more of us than them. And that's what they don't want you to realize. So if they keep you in this left and right, then you will be herded the way they want to herd you. And that's why the alt media is so key to this. That's why the alt-right is never going to get censored. Okay? Because they're going to keep you in the hive mind. Tim Pool, look at all these shills. They're all agents. They don't deal with any censorship and that stuff because they're doing exactly what they need them to do. Keep people pro-Trump, keep people hating liberals, right? Instead of waking up everybody to what's going on, how they're gaslighting the crap out of everybody around the clock. But it looks like it's too late to do anything about it. So keep an eye on this story. It's very important that people are aware of this. It's very frightening, obviously, that people are falling for this. Look at all the key undertones here and think to yourself, when have we ever seen this happening so much at once? So much at once with the corruption of this side and that side and the Supreme Court and this side and the Senate and everyone's disgusted. Everybody wants a government overhaul. But in reality, the structure that's in place in this country works and would continue to work if this government wasn't hijacked by all of these satanic cabal members who are members of secret societies who are working and networking together to destroy this and bring in this global enslavement system. I thank everybody for being here. I hope you're all doing well. God bless you as always and your families.